The distress signal cut through the silence of deep space at exactly 0300 hours. Nobody expected it to come from there. Nobody expected what came next. Nexus Station hung against the edge of a swirling blue nebula, its rotating rings catching starlight, its silver hull polished to a mirror shine. It was ancient. Over 100,000 years of history lived in its walls, and every 100 years, the greatest military powers in the known galaxy gathered here. Not to fight, to show, to boast, to remind each other of one simple truth, that power, not kindness, kept the peace between the stars. This year was different. This year, for the first time in the summit's entire history, humans had been invited. Supreme Admiral Zeth stood at the observation window on Deck 7, watching the alien ships dock. He was tall, thin. His skin shifted between deep blue and slate gray as the light changed around him, cycling through colors the way an ocean changed in a storm. 3 eyes blinked in sequence, left to right, never all at once. He had commanded fleets that spanned 4 star systems. He had never once met a human. He wasn't looking forward to it. "We should have blocked the invitation," he said. Behind him, Warlord Krell crossed 4 massive arms over his chest. He was built like a geological event. Red scales covered every inch of him, glinting under the station's artificial sun. He stood a full head taller than Zeth and wider than a standard doorframe. When he moved, the floor noticed. "The Council voted," Krell rumbled. His voice was what you'd expect from something that size, low, final, like a landslide starting. Humans have had faster-than-light travel for 30 years. 30 years earns them a seat at the table. That's the rule. Rules, Zeth said, can bend. Not this one. Zeth turned from the window. "What are they going to show us, Krell? Their ships are toys. Our children build better weapons in training exercises. They've been crossing this galaxy for barely 3 decades. We've had starships for 10,000 years. Krell didn't answer. He didn't need to. He agreed. Across the reception hall, 3 more military leaders had reached the same conclusion. Hive Commander 6 stood near the refreshment tables, her insectoid frame rigid with authority, mandibles clicking in rapid conversation with a junior officer. She was the smallest of the 5 commanders, but the most unsettling. Her compound eyes missed nothing. Her kind had evolved from pack hunters, and it showed in every movement, every calculated stillness. She was explaining, loudly, that a human ship couldn't outmaneuver a Hive scout drone. Stone Marshal Boro leaned against the far wall, arms folded, his skin the color and texture of volcanic rock. He laughed at something one of his aides said, a sound like boulders rolling downhill, deep and slow. The joke was about humans. It usually was. And Thought Admiral Liss simply stood in the center of the room, eyes half closed, glowing faintly from within, watching everything and saying nothing. Her kind communicated as much through presence as through words. She was the only one of the 5 who had not yet made a single comment about humanity. She was also, in many ways, the most dangerous of them all. The 5 commanders represented the strongest military forces in the known galaxy. And every one of them had spent the last 2 days privately agreeing that the human invitation was a courtesy, a gesture, a pat on the head for a species that had figured out how to make their ships go fast. Then the main doors opened. A single figure walked in. Commander Mira Cross was not what any of them expected. She was average height, dark-haired, dressed in a plain Navy uniform with minimal insignia. No medals, no decorative sash, no visible weapons, though everyone in the room assumed she had some. Her face was calm. Not the calm of someone trying to look brave. The calm of someone who had already decided they had nothing to prove. The station's AI announced her. Commander Mira Cross, we're representative of Earth and the Sol System Defense Force. She looked around the room once, quiet and precise, the way a pilot checks instruments before takeoff. Then she nodded. Not bowed, nodded. Thank you for the invitation, she said. Earth is honored to be here. Zeth moved first. He was always the one who moved first. He crossed the hall and stopped 2 feet from her, close enough that she had to tilt her head back slightly to look up at him. He let that distance stand. It was a tactic so old it didn't have a name anymore. Commander Cross, he said, I am Supreme Admiral Zeth of the Azoui Empire. I must say we were all quite surprised when we learned humans would be attending this year." She looked at him steadily. "I imagine you were." "Your species has made remarkable progress," he continued. "For a species so young?" "Progress tends to accelerate under pressure," she said. Krell appeared behind Zeth, making the floor vibrate with each step. "Warlord Krell Dominion," he said, not bothering to soften it. "Your kind has done much in a short time, Commander. But this summit has always been about the pinnacle of military achievement. I hope you're prepared for what that looks like." "I'm looking forward to it," Mira said. One by one, the others introduced themselves. Six clicked her mandibles in a greeting that might have been polite. Boro didn't bother with politeness and just stated his name and rank. Liz said nothing for a long moment, then simply said, "Welcome, Commander Cross," in a voice that sounded like it was coming from somewhere further away than her mouth. Mira acknowledged each of them with the same expression, measured, unhurried, like she was making mental notes. The station AI chimed. "All representatives have arrived. Please proceed to the presentation chamber." The Grand Hall had been built for exactly this kind of moment. The holographic display at its center was the largest in known space, capable of rendering a full-scale star system in real time. The 5 alien commanders took their places on the raised platform. Mira was directed to a smaller chair off to the side, slightly lower than the others. She sat without comment. The council mediator floated to the center stage. It had no face, just a smooth silver ovoid where features should have been, and a voice that resonated from everywhere and nowhere at once. "Welcome to the Centennial Military Showcase. For 100,000 years, this gathering has preserved peace through the balance of power. Today, for the first time, we are joined by humanity, the species that came last to the stars. We will begin with presentations from our established powers, followed by our newest guests." Polite applause from the crowd. Several delegations barely moved. "Admiral Zeth," the mediator said, "you may begin." Zeth rose. He had been rehearsing this moment for 6 months. The hologram shifted. In the center of the Grand Hall, a ship materialized, not large by the standards of the room, but elegant, impossibly sleek. Dark as a shadow at the edge of a sun, its hull seemed to absorb the light around it rather than reflect it, like a hole cut in reality. "The Ghost Fang," Zeth announced and let the name land before continuing. The pride of the Azoui Empire. Its adaptive camouflage can render it completely undetectable to any known scanning system in the galaxy. Not just visually invisible, electromagnetically silent, gravitationally neutral. A fleet of Ghost Fangs can enter an enemy system, position for a strike, and withdraw without the enemy ever knowing they were there. The hologram showed a demonstration. A planet's surface, defenses active, scanners running, nothing detected. Then, 3 Ghost Fangs materialized simultaneously from 0 distance, struck 3 separate targets with surgical precision, and vanished again in under 6 seconds. The crowd murmured. "Our engineers devoted 2 centuries to perfecting this," Zeth continued, glancing at Mira as he said it. "The ultimate predator requires no armor when nothing can see it." Mira watched quietly. Occasionally she made a small note on the pad in her hand. Krell went next. He activated his display, and the hall fell quiet at what appeared. The World Crusher was not a ship. It was a fact. It was larger than some moons. Its primary hull stretched across the hologram like a continent in motion. Its main cannon, a structure so massive it required its own internal gravity regulation systems to prevent it from tearing itself apart. "The World Crusher," Krell said simply, "the largest warship ever constructed. Its primary cannon can crack a planet's mantle from high orbit. It has never been used in a real engagement. Nothing has ever survived the demonstration phase to require one." He played the simulation. An uninhabited moon, selected for the test. The World Crusher's cannon charging, the color of a dying star, the firing. Then the moon. On neat as an egg cracked on a counter, splitting in 2 slow, terrible halves. The crowd gasped. Mira nodded once and made another note. 6 presented her death tide next. What emerged from the hologram wasn't a ship, it was a swarm. Thousands of individual combat drones, each the size of a small fighter, pouring from a central carrier vessel in a wave that stretched for kilometers. They moved in perfect coordination, each one independently capable, all of them operating as a single distributed intelligence. No single point of failure, Six explained, mandibles clicking with satisfaction. You cannot destroy the Death Tide by killing its command structure. There is no command structure. Each drone is the command. I'd destroy 1,000 of them, and the other 9,000 adapt automatically. The simulation showed a planetary defense network engaging the swarm. For every drone lost, 2 gaps in the defense were exploited. It was over in minutes. Boro stepped forward with the iron wall, a ship built so heavily shielded that several weapons had been developed specifically to try and destroy it, and it all failed. The demonstration involved firing every known energy weapon type at it simultaneously. The iron wall absorbed everything, not deflected, absorbed. Its shields ate weapons like a black hole ate light, and when the barrage ended, not a single system was offline. Then came Liss. Thought Admiral Liss stood at the center of the hologram display and said quietly, "Yeah, I'd like to demonstrate something different." The hologram showed a standard engagement, 2 fleets, equal numbers, equal armament, the Luminina fleet positioned facing an unnamed enemy formation. Then nothing happened, nothing visible. The enemy ships just stopped, drifted. Some began turning away from the battle, others powered down weapon systems, all without a shot being fired. "The Soul Catcher," Liss said. "It projects a field of calculated psychological resonance, not pain, not incapacitation, just doubt, the certainty that what you are doing is wrong, that the fight is not worth it, that something more important is happening somewhere else." She paused. "Most species find it very effective." Mira put her pad down for the first time and looked at Liss directly. Liss looked back. Something passed between them. Neither spoke. When all 5 had finished, the mediator turned to the human. "Commander Cross, the Council now welcomes Earth's presentation." Zeth smiled. It wasn't a warm smile. "Yes, Commander. Show us what your young species has managed to put together." Mira stood, walked to the center platform, and looked at the holographic display. Then she looked back at the room. "Thank you for your presentations," she said. "They were each genuinely impressive. Earth's contribution to this showcase is still in transit. It will arrive tomorrow morning." Silence, then murmuring. Then Six's mandibles clicking in a rapid rhythm that her translator rendered as laughter. "Your ship is late?" Boro rumbled. "Not late," Mira said. "On schedule. Some things are worth waiting for." "Why not show holographic data?" Krell asked, frowning. "Every other delegation prepared material in advance." "We prefer live demonstrations to simulations," Mira said simply. "I think you'll understand why tomorrow." As the session closed and the delegates moved toward the evening reception, the 5 commanders clustered together, watching the human cross the room at a relaxed pace. "Did you see her face?" Boro said. "She didn't react, not to the Ghost Fang, not to the World Crusher, nothing." "Either she's very disciplined," Six said, "or she doesn't understand what she was looking at." "Given their history," Zeth said, "I'd lean toward the latter." None of them noticed the small smile on Mira's face as she reached the corridor and activated the communicator at her wrist. "Stage is set," she said quietly. "Bring her in. Standard approach vector." "Full passive systems," a voice replied from somewhere in the dark between stars. "Understood, Commander. The Colossus is on her way." The evening reception filled the station's observation dome with light and sound and the smell of 100 different atmospheres, each delegation carrying their own climate preferences into the shared space like an invisible argument. Mira stood alone by the outer viewport, watching the alien ships in their orbits around the station, each one positioned where it could be seen, each one a statement. She had been standing there for several minutes when she heard the heavy footsteps. "Admiring superior technology, Commander?" She turned. Zeth was approaching, carrying 2 drinks, offering one. She accepted. "Admiring engineering," she corrected. "Your Ghost Fang is remarkable work. The phase-adaptive camouflage alone would take most species decades to reverse engineer." Zeth blinked all 3 eyes at once. He hadn't expected the compliment or the technical specificity. Your reaction during the presentation was interesting, he said. You showed no surprise. Earth has a saying, Mira said. Never show your cards before the final hand. Cards? A game of chance? A game of strategy. It means don't reveal your strength until the moment it counts. Before Szeth could respond, Cran's voice boomed across the room like a foghorn. There she is, the human who makes us wait. He pushed through the crowd, followed by the others. Surely you can show us something, Six said, mandibles twitching. A diagram, a technical readout, anything. I prefer to let actions speak for themselves, Mira said. Or perhaps, Six said, her translator adding a subtle edge, there are no actions. Perhaps this is what your people call a bluff. Mira looked at her steadily. Earth doesn't bluff about military matters. Boro laughed, a sound like a building settling. Tell us, human. What could your species possibly have built that compares to what we showed today? We've been building warships for 10,000 years. You've been doing it for 30. Mira looked at each of them in turn. You're right that we're newer to space, she said, but you're wrong to think that means we're behind. Liz stepped closer. Her glowing eyes were fixed on Mira's face with unusual intensity. You speak with confidence, she said, for someone attending their first summit. Experience isn't always measured in years, Mira said. Sometimes it's measured in intensity. Szeth frowned. But what does that mean? Mira looked around at all five of them. The room had grown quieter. Other guests were watching. How many wars has your civilization fought in the last 500 years, Warlord Kran? Kran blinked. 3. All Krell victories. She nodded and looked to the others. Szeth said 2. Six said 4, defensive conflicts. Boro said 1 major war, 3 centuries past. Liz said 1 brief defensive engagement, long ago. Mira let the answers settle. Earth's recorded history includes over 15,000 documented conflicts before we reached space, she said. In the last 500 years alone, we fought more than 300 major wars. Our most devastating single conflict killed nearly 100 million people in 6 years. The silence was complete. Szeth spoke first. That's barbaric. That's survival, Mira said. Every weapon we have we built because we had to. Every military technology you'll see tomorrow exists because at some point in our history, humans with inferior weapons lost everything. We learned. We improved. We adapted. And we never stopped. She looked at each of them. While your civilizations were enjoying long stretches of peace between the stars, we were testing weapons against each other that could level cities in seconds. You're proud of this? Liz asked softly. Her eyes had dimmed slightly. Not proud, Mira said, but honest about it, and grateful for what it taught us. Kran forced a laugh, though it came out smaller than usual. Big words. Tomorrow we'll see if there's anything behind them. Tomorrow you will, Mira agreed. The reception continued. But the 5 commanders kept their distance for the rest of the evening. They gathered at the far edge of the dome, speaking low and fast. 15,000 wars, Six muttered. Impossible. No species survives that level of sustained conflict, Boro said, unless they become exceptional at it. That's exactly Szeth's point, Kran said. Liz said nothing for a moment, then, I tried to read her emotional state during that conversation. All 4 looked at her. And, Szeth said. Nothing, Liz said. Not blankness, not suppression, genuine calm. Whatever is coming tomorrow, she is completely comfortable with it. She paused. That concerns me more than anything, she said. Across the dome, Mira stood at the viewport, looking out into the dark. Her enhanced hearing had caught fragments of their conversation. The smile she allowed herself was small and private and gone before anyone could see it. She raised her communicator. Colossus, what's your ETA? The reply was immediate and steady. 17 hours, Commander, right on schedule. Good, she said, good. Morning came as it always did on Nexus Station, manufactured and precise, the habitat ring rotating into the light cycle at exactly the programmed hour. Mira stood in front of her mirror, straightening her uniform collar. Her communicator chimed. Commander, this is Captain Reyes. We're in position outside sensor range, awaiting your signal. Hold there, Mira said. I'll signal you from the chamber. Understood. The crew is ready. They've been ready since yesterday. I know. Tell them they'll get their moment. She arrived at the presentation chamber to find it already full. Word had spread fast. The 5 alien commanders stood at the front, their demeanor a careful mix of skepticism and the kind of curiosity that people feel when they've tried very hard to eliminate it and failed. The chamber's holographic display showed Nexus Station and the surrounding region of space. Hundreds of ships, every major class of vessel represented, the 5 great military fleets of the known galaxy, assembled in one place. The mediator called the session to order. Commander Cross, the Galactic Council welcomes Earth's presentation. Mira walked to the center platform. Thank you. Earth is honored. She activated her wrist device and the hologram shifted to show an empty region of space at the edge of the system. Our vessel is currently approaching from standard interception vector. I'd like to invite everyone to watch. Where is it? Someone in the crowd asked. Give it a moment, Mira said. She tapped her wrist device. Captain Reyes, you may bring her in. For several seconds, nothing happened. The hologram showed empty space, clean and dark, with the distant stars hanging still behind it. Then, the station's deep-range sensors picked up something. The display recalculated, then recalculated again. Then, a third time. The numbers it was generating didn't make sense, and so the system kept checking them, as though convinced it had made an error. A murmur began moving through the crowd. That reading can't be right, someone said. The sensors are calibrated correctly, an officer confirmed, checking his instruments with increasingly wide eyes. They're calibrated correctly, and those readings are accurate. The object grew on the display as it entered the inner system, and as it grew, it became clear that the sensors hadn't been making an error. They had simply never encountered anything that size before. It was a ship. It was dark, angular, and massive in a way that scale readouts failed to communicate until you tried to compare it to the other ships already in frame. Those ships, those proud, enormous, state-of-the-art vessels, began to look like shuttlecraft parked next to a mountain range. The Ghost Fang, the World Crusher, the Death Tide, the Iron Wall, the Soul Catcher. 5 of the most powerful vessels in the known galaxy, all gathered in one place for the greatest military showcase of the century. Every single one of them fit simultaneously, went into the shadow of what was coming. What do you think is really happening here? Write in the comments, do you think humanity was always hiding this, or did they build it in secret? Let us know. I present to you, Mira said, her voice level and unhurried, the HSS Colossus, a mid-sized vessel in Earth's deep space fleet. The room erupted, not into applause, into shock. Zeth's mouth opened. No words came out. All 3 of his eyes had stopped blinking, which for his species was a biological indicator of extreme cognitive disruption. Mid-sized, Cran repeated. The word came out slowly, as though he was uncertain of its meaning in this context. Yes, Mira said. We have smaller and we have larger. The 5 alien commanders stood in absolute silence as the Colossus continued its approach. It was not elegant like the Ghost Fang. It was not vast in the way the World Crusher was vast. It was vast in the way that geological features are vast, the way a mountain range is vast, not because someone designed it to impress, but because it simply needed to be that size to contain everything inside it. Its hull was dark and angular, flat planes meeting at precise angles that seemed to catch light on their own terms. It didn't gleam. It absorbed. Like it had decided light was a resource, not a feature. The automated defense systems around Nexus Station began activating, not because anyone ordered them to, because they recognized the Colossus as a potential planet-killer class object and reacted the way they were designed to react without being asked. Alarms sounded throughout the station. Unauthorized activation detected, the mediator announced, its voice straining for calm. Multiple ships are powering defensive systems. Stand down, Zeth snapped into his communicator. This is not an attack. My fleet is responding the same way, Crane said, his eyes fixed on the display. The automated protocols have classified the human vessel as an existential level threat. I can't override the classification because the classification is technically correct. Liz turned to Mira. Her eyes were bright and sharp. Your ship has triggered every defense array in this sector, she said. What exactly have you brought here? Exactly what I said, Mira replied. A mid-sized battleship. She activated her communicator. Captain Reyes, power down all offensive systems, full passive broadcast on all frequencies, let everyone see everything. Captain Reyes's voice was crisp and immediate. Already done, Commander. All weapons cold. Shields at minimum tolerance. We're broadcasting full transparency to all stations and vessels. The alarms quieted, one by one. The 5 commanders stood very still. Mira looked at them. I'd like to invite you all aboard for a tour. Earth has nothing to hide. The shuttle journey to the Colossus was longer than it should have been for a ship that close. That was the first thing that reset everyone's understanding. What appeared close in the hologram was, in reality, positioned at a significant distance. The ship was so large that the standard visual reference points for judging distance didn't apply. By the time the shuttle reached the outer hull, 20 minutes had passed and the alien commanders had spent the entire trip pressed against the viewports, not speaking. It's bigger than the sensor readings suggested, Six said finally. The hull material absorbs most scanning waves, Mira said. The readings are always conservative. The shuttle entered a bay. Krell had thought the reception bay of his world crusher was large. It was the kind of space where you kept full squadrons of fighters, bombers, support craft. Enormous by most standards. The Colossus's bay made the world crushers look like a garage. Row after row of fighters, bombers, dropships, and specialized craft were arranged in precise formations, stretching back far enough that the far wall was difficult to make out. The ceiling was high enough that smaller vessels were parking in tiers, stacked above each other on elevated platforms. Crew members moved through the space with practiced efficiency, and none of them paying much attention to the arriving shuttle. There were a lot of crew members. Captain Reyes was waiting at the landing pad. She was compact and sharp-featured, with the kind of posture that suggested she had been standing at attention for a large portion of her life. "Welcome aboard the Colossus," she said. "Commander Cross has arranged full access. I'll be your guide." "How many crew?" Six asked immediately, mandibles clicking. "Standard deployment is 15,000 personnel," Reyes said, "though we can maintain full operational function with 500 in an emergency." Boro stared at her. 15,000. Different design philosophy, Mira said. We favor redundancy. The tour moved through the ship's bridge first. It was massive, with stations for hundreds of officers, multiple parallel command structures, and displays covering every system on the vessel simultaneously. Unlike the bright holographic interfaces favored by alien militaries, the human systems were flat, functional, and clean. Nothing unnecessary, everything duplicated. "Your technology looks primitive," Zeth observed, studying a navigation interface. "It looks reliable," Reyes said. "Everything you see has 3 independent backups. Nothing on this ship fails completely." Then, the Weapons Control Center. The alien commanders had built careers on understanding military technology. They had studied weapons design, theoretical capabilities, arms races spanning millennia. They thought they understood the full spectrum of what it was possible to build. The Colossus's Weapons Control Center reminded them they were wrong. Row after row of stations monitored systems unlike anything in the known galaxy. A weapons officer walked them through the sections with the quiet confidence of someone who had spent years working in a place where these things were normal. "Kinetic impact rail systems," she said, pointing to one section. "They accelerate solid projectiles to 98% of light speed. The kinetic energy on impact is sufficient to vaporize most hull materials regardless of shielding." Zeth was doing the math in his head. He didn't like the answer. "Plasma lance arrays," the officer continued, "capable of sustaining a focused beam long enough to cut through capital ship hull armor at a rate of—" "What are those?" Krell asked suddenly. He was pointing to the largest display in the room. On it, our officers monitored a set of massive cylindrical objects stored deep in the Colossus's lower sections. They were enormous. Even on the scale of this ship, they were enormous. The weapons officer glanced at Mira. Mira nodded. "Nova bombs," the officer said simply. "Each one is designed to trigger a localized stellar reaction on detonation, essentially a contained miniature supernova." Silence. "We carry 12, the officer added. The silence got heavier. Liz had gone very still. Her eyes had dimmed to almost nothing. When she spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "Why would you build something like that?" Mira looked at her directly. Because 15,000 years of war taught us one thing above everything else, she said. The species that survive are the ones who are never outgunned, not once, not by anything. She paused. We built the Colossus and ships like it not because we want to use them, but because we never want to face a situation where we need them and don't have them. On the shuttle back to the station, the 5 commanders were silent for a long time. Then Zeth said quietly, "She said it was mid-sized." Nobody responded. Then he said, "She said they have larger." Krell turned to look at him. "And smaller," Mira added from the front of the shuttle. Zeth looked at Mira. "How many ships like this does Earth have?" Mira looked out the forward viewport at the stars. 30, she said. Zeth closed all 3 eyes. The demonstration was scheduled for the outer system, where a debris field from an ancient moon provided adequate targets without endangering anything currently alive. The observation dome filled beyond capacity for the first time in the summit's history. Delegates from every species pushed for position at the viewports. Dozens more crowded around secondary displays throughout the station. The 5 commanders stood at the front. The Colossus hung at the edge of the debris field, dark and patient, while the station's holographic display tracked it and its surroundings in real time. It was the only ship in frame that didn't look like it belonged to the gathering it had joined. It looked like something that had arrived from somewhere else. "The Colossus will demonstrate 5 capabilities today," Mira said. "Each one corresponds to one of the specialties your vessels displayed yesterday." Zeth crossed his arms. "First," Mira said, "stealth." On the display, the Colossus shimmered once, then it was gone. The not faded, not dimmed, gone, as if someone had cut a hole in space where it had been. Zeth immediately activated his own scanning equipment. His Ghostfang sensors were the finest in the galaxy, tuned specifically to detect cloaked vessels. He ran every frequency, every wave type, every detection method his species had developed over 2 centuries of work. Nothing. "Our approach is different from the Ghostfang," Mira explained. "It doesn't just suppress the ship's signature, it uses quantum phase shifting combined with active light redirection to remove the vessel from detectable space entirely. While cloaked, the ship continues to move, reposition, and operate at full capacity." Several minutes passed. Zeth kept scanning. Nothing. Then the Colossus reappeared, in a completely different position than it had been. The readout confirmed it had moved nearly 4,000 kilometers while invisible. "In combat," Mira said, "this allows repositioning without the enemy knowing where you've gone. Not just hiding, disappearing and returning from somewhere else." Krell grunted. It was, reluctantly, a different caliber of capability than his own. "Second," Mira said, "offensive systems." The Colossus rotated slowly and panels slid open along its hull. Rail system mounts extended, plasma lance batteries powered up, and targeting locks established on a cluster of large debris chunks 3,000 kilometers distant. The rail systems fired first. The results were immediate and absolute. Several chunks of debris that had been the size of small buildings simply ceased to exist, replaced by expanding clouds of fine dust. "Kinetic impact at near light speed," Mira said. "No energy discharge, no electromagnetic signature prior to impact, no warning." Then the plasma lances fired. Where they touched the larger debris fragments, the rock didn't break. It didn't crack or explode. It boiled away into vapor, cleanly and completely, in seconds. Krell had built his entire military reputation around the World Crusher's ability to destroy planetary objects. He watched the Colossus casually eliminate debris fields with secondary weapon systems and said nothing. There was nothing adequate to say. "Third," Mira said, "drone operations." The Colossus's bay doors opened. 6 had built her career on the death tide. 2,000 combat drones moving in perfect distributed coordination, the most advanced autonomous combat system in the galaxy. She had demonstrated it yesterday with considerable pride. From the Colossus's bay doors came 10,000 drones. 6 went very still. "Each drone is independently AI controlled," Mira said. "No central command node, no single point of failure. Each unit is capable of independent tactical decision-making at the microsecond level while maintaining strategic coordination with the full swarm." The drones moved through the debris field like water through a maze. They navigated complex shifting obstacle fields at combat speed, targeting specific fragments with surgical accuracy, maintaining formation integrity through rapid environmental changes. When they attacked, they did so simultaneously from multiple vectors, leaving no safe direction. This represents approximately 20% of the Colossus's total drone capacity, Mira added. E6 said very quietly, 20%. Yes, Mira said. Fourth, Mira continued, defensive systems. A large fragment of the destroyed moon was pushed toward the Colossus by hidden engines attached to it before the demonstration began. It was substantial, the size of a small building, moving at significant velocity. The Colossus's shields activated as the fragment approached. They didn't look like shields, not like the solid energy barriers that surrounded most warships, the visible domes of power that deflected attacks outward. The Colossus's defensive layers appeared in sequence, one after another, each slightly different from the last. The outermost layer made contact with the incoming fragment. The fragment didn't bounce, it came apart, not into large chunks, but into progressively finer material, each layer breaking it down further, the final traces washing over the inner defenses as dust. 7 sequential layers, Mira said, each designed for a specific threat type. The outer layers handle kinetic impacts, the inner layers handle energy weapons, radiation, and other threat categories. Nothing has penetrated all 7 in testing. Boro stood very still. His entire military doctrine was built around impenetrability. He had believed, until this morning, that the iron wall was the definitive answer to that question. Fifth and final demonstration, Mira said. She turned to Liss. Psychological warfare countermeasures. Liss's eyes brightened immediately. I have not attempted to use the Soul Catcher's systems, she said. I gave no such instruction. Correct, Mira said. You didn't need to. The Colossus deployed its resonance-dampening field when it entered the system. If the Soul Catcher had attempted to project during that time, your crew would have experienced significant discomfort. She paused. Earth has a long history of conflicts that involved psychological and cognitive attacks. We adapted. Liss took an involuntary step backward. The implications of that were significant. No species has developed an effective counter to Luminina projection, she said, her voice carefully controlled. No species you've encountered, Mira said. The observation dome was completely silent. Mira deactivated the display. The Colossus hung in the debris field, its hull dark and still, surrounded by the floating remains of everything it had demonstrated against. Earth came late to the stars, Mira said, but we did not arrive unprepared. What you've seen today represents a fraction of the Colossus's full capacity. We did not build these ships to threaten our neighbors. We built them so that humanity would never again face a threat without the means to answer it. She looked at all 5 commanders in turn. We came here today not to boast. We came here to be honest. The crowd in the observation dome began talking all at once. What do you think humanity's real intention is? Defense or something else? Drop your theory in the comments. This is where it gets interesting. The final day of the summit opened with a tension that hadn't existed on the first day. The scheduled panels continued, the diplomatic receptions went ahead, the technical exchanges happened as planned. But every conversation, every meeting, every quiet gathering in a corridor or observation alcove came back to the same subject. The Colossus, and what it meant. 30 ships. The 5 commanders had not slept well. Mira found the station's garden dome in the early hours of the morning, when the synthetic lighting was still cycling through its pre-dawn phase. She had discovered it on her first day. It was the quietest place on the station, and it smelled like real plants from 100 worlds, which was something that cost considerably more than the smell implied. She was sitting on a bench between a Terran oak tree and something that looked like a blue coral sculpture, but was breathing slowly when footsteps approached. She looked up to find Liss standing at the entrance to the garden path. "May I?" Liss asked. "Of course." The Luminina commander sat across from her, and her movements fluid and quiet. For several minutes she simply looked at the garden. "I come here every summit," she said finally. "It's the only place on the station where the air feels like it comes from somewhere real." It does, Mira said. They grow it all in the station's biome section. Liz turned to look at her. Your ships could dominate this galaxy, she said. It wasn't an accusation, it was a fact stated carefully to see what came back. Our capacity for warfare is real, Mira agreed. So is our capacity for peace. We've spent a long time learning both. Why reveal it now? Liz asked. You could have continued developing in isolation. With 30 ships of that class, you owe no one an explanation. Because isolation was becoming the wrong answer, Mira said. Humanity has been alone in this galaxy our entire history. We built our strength in isolation because we had to. But we can't grow in isolation. And honestly, she paused. We don't want to. Liz's communicator chimed. She checked it. The Council requests our presence, all 5 commanders and you. I thought they might, Mira said. They walked together toward the Council chamber. The mediator was already there when they arrived. So were the others. Zeth stood with his arms behind his back, expression carefully controlled. Krell sat with his massive forearms on the table, watching the door. Six and Boro exchanged glances as Mira entered. Commander Cross, the mediator said, the events of this summit have raised concerns that must be addressed directly. The Galactic Council must understand Earth's intentions. I understand, Mira said. She sat down and looked around the table. Meek, Earth's intentions are straightforward. We want to join the galactic community as full members, not as a threat, not as conquerors, as equals. Equals, Krell said, with 30 ships that each individually outclass the combined capability of our fleets. 30 ships doesn't make us equal, Mira said. It makes us capable. There's a difference. We're not interested in domination. We've never moved against any other species. In 30 years of faster-than-light travel, Earth has not fired on a single non-human vessel. Because you were hiding your strength, Zeth said. Because we had no reason to use it, Mira replied. There's also a difference. Boro leaned forward. What does Earth actually want? Mira looked at him directly. Security. The same thing every civilization wants. We built the Colossus and her sisters because our history made it clear that being unprepared for a threat is fatal. We're not asking for recognition of our superiority. We're asking for a place in this community. Membership in the Council, the mediator said. And something more, Mira said. A defensive alliance. Earth offers its military capability to the Galactic Council, not as the dominant power, as a partner, a guarantor. If something out there in the dark decides this part of the galaxy is worth attacking, we want to be standing next to you when it comes, not waiting behind our own borders, hoping it doesn't reach us. The chamber was quiet. Zeth was the first to speak. You're proposing to be the galaxy's defenders. I'm proposing partnership, Mira said. Your civilizations have advanced in medicine, energy, philosophy, and exploration in ways we haven't. We've been focused on survival. Together, we fill each other's gaps. Liz's eyes glowed soft and steady. Your military technology for our advancements in other fields. Equal exchange, Mira confirmed. Earth doesn't seek to rule. We seek to belong. The 5 commanders looked at each other. Something passed between them, a silent recalibration. The Council must vote, the mediator said. All member species will have a voice. Of course, Mira said. Earth is patient. 3 days later, the full Council assembled in the Great Hall. Mira stood outside at the viewport where she had first stood when she arrived. The same stars, the same station, a completely different situation. The door slid open behind her. She turned. All 5 commanders were approaching, their expressions unreadable, their pace deliberate. Zeth spoke first. Commander Cross, the Council has reached its decision. Mira waited. Earth is accepted as a full member of the Galactic Council, Zeth said. The proposal for a defensive alliance has been approved. The breath Mira let out was slow and quiet. With conditions, Six added. Name them, Mira said. Knowledge exchange, Six said, mandibles clicking more slowly than usual. Your military technology in exchange for our advancements in medicine, energy production, and exploration science. Agreed, Mira said. Joint training programs, Krell said. Your officers train with ours. Our officers train with yours, at every level. Agreed. Oversight committees, Boro rumbled, to ensure the alliance serves the community equally, not just Earth's interests. More than agreed, Mira said. We welcome it. And cultural exchange, Liz said, her eyes warm. Understanding beyond military cooperation, shared history, shared learning. Mira smiled. That one we've been looking forward to since before we launched our first ship. Then it is settled, the mediator announced, floating into the corridor to join them. The Galactic Defense Alliance is formed. Earth is a founding member. They walked together toward the Great Hall. Zeth moved beside Mira as they approached the doors. Were you certain they would accept? He asked quietly. Mira thought about it. I was hopeful, she said. Humanity learned a long time ago that the best way to prevent war is to make the cost too high for anyone who might consider starting one. The same principle works here. The alliance benefits everyone. So everyone benefits from making it work. Because your ships will protect council space, Zeth said, and because your civilizations will help humanity become something more than a species that's very good at building weapons, Mira said. We've spent thousands of years perfecting the art of conflict. Now we'd like to learn the art of actually lasting peace. That's not something you get from a blueprint. The doors of the Great Hall opened. The assembled representatives rose. The 5 alien commanders who had arrived at this summit confident in their own power, ready to condescend, ready to dismiss, stood now beside the human who had quietly rearranged every assumption they'd brought with them. There was no resentment in their posture. What replaced it was something that had no equivalent in most military vocabularies. Respect, like the earned kind. That evening, as the summit's final reception drew to a close, the 5 commanders gathered with Mira in the observation dome one last time. Beyond the viewport, their respective fleets had reformed. The Ghost Fang, the World Crusher, the Death Tide, the Iron Wall, the Soul Catcher. And beyond all of them, already beginning its departure vector, the Colossus. Its dark hull barely visible against the stars it was moving toward, enormous and unhurried, carrying its 30 billion tons of human engineering back toward the Sol system and whatever came next. To think, Krell said, looking out at it. There was something in his voice that hadn't been there 3 days ago, almost wonder. We came here to show what we'd built. Your ships are still remarkable, Mira said. That wasn't a show. Every one of them represents extraordinary engineering and extraordinary history. But different, Liz said. Different, Mira agreed. And difference is exactly what makes this alliance worth building. None of us has everything. All of us have something the others need. Zeth watched the Colossus for a long moment, his 3 eyes tracking its slow movement through the star field. When we boasted about our ships, he said slowly, we were doing what military commanders always do. Performing strength, defining ourselves by what we could destroy. He paused. I don't think that's what you did. No, Mira said. What were you doing? She thought about it for a moment. Introducing ourselves, she said. We didn't come here to threaten you or to impress you. We came here because the galaxy is larger than any one species. And because whatever is out there in the dark between the galaxies, beyond the mapped edges of charted space, we'd rather face it together than alone. She looked at him. The Colossus isn't a threat. It's a door. We built it so that no one could close that door on us. The observation dome was quiet. Outside, the Colossus continued its departure, growing smaller with distance, the size of it becoming harder to hold in the mind the further it got, until it was just a dark shape against the stars, and then the stars themselves. Liz spoke without looking away from the viewport. I attempted the scan again, she said, after the demonstration, a full read on your emotional state. Mira waited. Fear, Liz said, small, deep, old, the kind that doesn't go away, it just becomes the foundation you build on. She finally looked at Mira. Dada, you are afraid of what's out there. Yes, Mira said simply. So are we, Liz said. So are we all. Good, Mira said. Fear is what made us build. Fear is what made us reach out. Fear is what brought every single species in this room to these meetings every 100 years, because being alone and powerful is safer in theory and terrifying in practice. She looked at all 5 of them. Humanity came to the stars late. We arrived at this summit without a history with any of you, without allies, without a council seat, without a record that would earn us trust. We walked in here with one ship, and an invitation that most of you thought was a mistake. And now, we're walking out as founding members of a defensive alliance that covers the known galaxy. She paused. We didn't earn that through the Colossus. We earned it because we were honest about what we are, what we've been, and what we want to become. Outside, in the dark between the stars, the Colossus was gone. But what it left behind wasn't absence. It was the particular quiet that follows when the most powerful thing in the room has chosen, deliberately and without hesitation, to be something other than a weapon. Humanity had arrived at the stars, not as conquerors, not as subjects, not even as equals, not quite yet, but as the thing every old power in the galaxy had quietly, in the back of every calculation they'd ever run, been hoping would eventually show up. A partner, a guarantee. A hand extended from somewhere fast and fierce, and completely unlike anything that had come before, offering not dominance but something harder to build and longer to last. The boasting was over. Something real had begun.